a high pop fly. That's in the air. It's got a chance. And off the scoreboard, Gian Fernandez walks it off for the Highlanders. Hello and welcome to the Walkoff. I'm your host, Jason Greer, and our guest today is Dustin McComas of Five Tool Baseball. Dustin is currently the senior editor for Five Tool Baseball, and his experience includes he was a beat writer for the Longhorn baseball team. He's a scouting and media director for the Kane Southwest, director of baseball coverage and beat writer for the orangebloods.com, part-time scout for the Dodgers, an associate scout for the Pirates, and a Big 12 Southwest blogger. And lastly, he's a graduate of the University of Texas. Dustin, thanks for joining us. Been a fan for a couple years now. I found you on X, been following the videos, the profiles, the write-ups. Great stuff. Really appreciate what you do out there. Could you tell our audience a little bit about what Five Tool does? I know the scouting part and what you guys do, but a little bit more what's behind the scenes at Five Tool Baseball.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me. And so Five Tool Baseball, really, as you guys know, once you get through the spring season, there's summer baseball. And, a long time ago, well before I joined Five Tool, the genesis was all these top players were having to leave the regional area and playing in these events. And the college coaches were kind of scratching their heads and a little frustrated, like, man, why can't we just have a bunch of events in our region, and all the best players can stay here and we can all go watch the best players and we don't have to travel all around. So that kind of sparked Five Tool with Lynn Van Laningham leading the way there. And from there, it's just kind of blossomed into more and more events, especially in the summer, but even in the fall as well. But I feel like we really transform things from holding up an iPhone right now is recording basically every pitch. And that's a consistent thing at our events, is that you're going to get that media coverage. So if you went in the summer and you showed up and you threw 90 miles an hour and you threw really well, that's getting captured. We're uploading that to the internet. It's out there. College coaches are kind of getting that exposure. Kids are getting more opportunities and more exposure. So that's really how it sparked, was more regional events, first class operated, and then the media coverage component, to where we're really capturing a lot of things on video and uploading for the internet. Now we have our own website at fivetool.org with player profile pages. So if we capture anything for you, like, if I go to a game this week, weather permitting, if I go to a game this week and I'm getting video, not only is that going to get published on X, it's also going to get uploaded to our Five Tool profile pages as well. So if you're a player, you can have access to that profile, for a very small fee. And then any college coach you send that profile to would also have access to all of your content, even if that coach is a subscribing member. So we really try to grow the game. We like covering the star players. It's awesome to see those guys, but we also get a special enjoyment out of those kids that maybe just need a little bit of coverage to kind of get that JUCO opportunity or that D2 opportunity. And all, by the way, creating these events that in the summer, 60, 70, 100 college coaches can show up for 3 days and know, hey, we're going to see a lot of the best players. We're going to see a first-class operation. So that's really what Five Tool's about.
Yeah, exposing the kids. And that's one thing I noticed is it's not just the guys that are the top 100 in the country. Like you guys are out and you're exposing the kids. You said it perfectly, and I love what you guys do. And you put a little note in there when you put things on X, hey, this kid's uncommitted. He's looking for something. And that kid turns around and shares it, and he's, tagging different coaches and things. I don't know how, if I was a college coach, I would feel my mentions blown up, but that's a whole different discussion. But what you guys are doing to get those kids out there and be seen is it's fantastic. And I enjoy watching what you put out and what you read. It's a resource for me when I'm calling play-by-play on some of these players that I really haven't seen, especially when we roll into the playoffs. It's a great source as a former scout. You're a former scout. It's everything you can do to break down a player and get a little bit of an edge when I'm calling those games. So, hey, kudos to you guys and what you do. Again, I really appreciate that, and I've been following that for a couple years now. Main reason I had you on is I really wanted to kind of dive into some of these high school kiddos and what's happening. The Woodlands, we're in 13-6A. I would argue one of the toughest districts in Region 2, probably
Yeah.
one of the toughest ones in the state. Last year we had Oak Ridge, Willis, Grand Oaks, and then the Woodlands kind of snuck in there at the end.
Mhm.
They started the year out really tough. I think 1-8 or 2-6 through the first part of district, and they kind of got things turned around. And a player I've seen you uh, put quite a bit out. I think he's a special kid. He got called up last year as a freshman, Cash Clayton, and when he got called up, he first pitch or second pitch he sees first at bat goes yard, and the Highlanders take a quick lead and kind of helps spark the season. So he's a kid I kind of want to watch as the year goes on. And then we got Jack Schmeckel, another guy
Mhm.
that's big on you guys' radar. But looking to the other teams, what last year it was Willis was second. They're a big contender this year. Oak Ridge is
Mhm.
back, and they're reloaded with Jacob Evans and then Grand Oaks. So, kind of
Mhm.
what's your take, what you see in 13-6A, and how you see things shaping up in that district?
Yeah, it's certainly you're right. It's going to be one of the tougher districts in 6A, and especially in the Houston area. Just me sizing up the district. I really, really like this Woodlands team. It reminds me some of the teams that used to really uh, beat us around the yard when I was in high school. You know, the 03, 04 teams that were just loaded with high end talent. They were deep, they were versatile. So I'm especially high on those guys. I know they didn't quite have the season that maybe thought they were going to have last year, but so many of those guys came back pitching, young talent. You mentioned a guy like Cash Clayton, just a really dynamic, big,
Yeah.
physical, projectable guy. Jack Smeckel, I think they're going to unleash him this year. So I think it's to me the Woodlands is the clear favorite in this district, and part of the reason why is Grand Oaks, Houston Tomlinson and Mark Barnhart move on. Obviously, but Mason Kitchen is back. Really good left-handed pitcher. I think he's going to be one of the better left-handed pitchers in that district. Can they kind of find their footing to replace a lot of those key upperclassmen and compete in the district again? Probably so. Willis has one of my favorite juniors, Engage Blinka, just a
Oh,
really
thank
athletic,
God, I love watching that
projectable.
kid play. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, DBU commitment. He's really skilled. He's really athletic. He's just a really dynamic player. And he's one of the types of players to me that like can kind of change a game in a variety of ways. And when you
Yes.
have one of those guys, it can make a big difference in the playoff race. You mentioned Oak Ridge, bringing back Evans. I think they've got a real chance to make some noise. Whenever you have a veteran like that on the mound, it can take you a long way, especially when you get in district play and you've got to face that guy once a week. It's a tough proposition. He's kind of unique too. He's kind of a lower slot guy.
Yeah.
The shapes of the pitches. You just don't see many looks like that throughout the high school season.
Yeah,
And
he,
then,
he
you know,
gave us all kinds of fits last year. It was a 0-0 game
Mhm.
going in. We went extra innings. It was him and Holyfield
uh
to watch those two kind of duke it out, and they both went seven, and I think they hit their pitch count. So, and you're right, what he throws and how he works the zone.
yeah.
Yeah, he is definitely that's a big pickup for A&M, I think.
Yeah, yeah. There's just like it's in a high school season, guys don't see many guys like that. And then he's running into the low 90s, which
Yes.
makes it even more difficult to deal with as well. But and they got a guy too named Derek Hernandez, who's just like a really solid ball player. They got a couple guys like that through the lineup that really compete. They make the plays on defense. They do a pretty good job of not beating themselves. So I think Oak Ridge is going to make some noise as well. And perhaps Conroe maybe takes a little bit of a step forward. They got a guy named Tanner Trantham I really like,
Hmm.
two-way guy, physical, strong, can hit with some power, can kind of change the game in the variety of ways. So it's going to be a tough district. To me, on paper, the Woodlands is kind of head and shoulders from a talent and experience standpoint above the rest of the pack. But there's gonna be enough teams in this district to where any night, teams are gonna be capable of beating each other. But really kind of look at Grand Oaks if they can replace some of those guys they lost on the mound. Oak Ridge, I think, can take a step forward. Willis has some dynamic players. Conroe has some dynamic players as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look at this district, and it's hard to try to keep things on the upside. You look at the bottom half of that district. Cleveland, Caney Creek, I don't think they won a district game last year.
Hmm.
Cleveland, the only 2 games they won was against Caney Creek.
Yeah.
And then you look at New Caney's they had a coaching change. They brought in Joey Cheatham. He came out of Clear Creek. He was a varsity assistant. I got to speak with him the other day, and he had a lot of good things to say and what he's doing. They're getting ready to open up new facilities, and they're actually closing down Adam Dunfield. It's hard to believe. That's where
Oh wow.
my career started over there, 2003 as a varsity assistant. So to see all that kind of go away, they got the new facilities coming in, and he's pretty optimistic about what they have, but he's also understands what's in front of him. And then you look at
Hmm.
College Park, you got a player like Evan Mann,
Yeah.
nice little utility player, and then a kid. And I think you've seen him a little bit. I've been working with him on the side a little. Is Cam Caldwell?
Hmm.
6'3", 220. Kid's got legs like Spencer Strider.
Those are some legs.
Yeah, and he's learning his way on the mound. I've
Hmm.
seen him at 88, 89, 90 out of the bullpen. Good movement. He's got little things to clean up, but that's a kid, you got that coming in out of the bullpen. If it's a close game, they could be a team kind of there in the mix. But and I'm biased, right? I live in the Woodlands. I've covered the Woodlands. And you're from around here, correct?
Yeah, I was first graduating class from Klein Collins. So I started my
Okay.
high school career at Klein Oaks. So yeah, I know the area very well.
So were you there with the Sherry and uh
So so Aaron Schultz was a freshman. Rick Haig and Aaron Schultz, I believe, were freshmen when I was a senior.
okay.
So that group
Yeah.
coming through, Sam Stafford, Austin DeSherry, all those guys were coming up through right when I left there. So basically, they got really good when I left.
But
So they got the old guys out of there that weren't very good, and they got the young talent coming through there.
And those were, well, that was in the middle of my scouting days, and we spent a
Hmm.
lot of time there watching those kids. Sherry, Stafford, those were
Yep.
UT guys, correct?
CJ Hinojosa,
You had
yeah.
those, yeah. Haig
Travis
at
Kugat,
Rice.
yeah. Haig went to Rice. Travis Kugat went to Houston for a little bit. They had a lefty. I forget his name. Went to Missouri. Was a good lefty coming through there. So, yeah, they had a lot of talent coming through there
There was a
once I
little
moved
righty
on.
that played for me with the Heat. Corey, I can't remember his name. He was good. He was 87,
Hmm.
88, but he was
Yeah,
behind Sherry and Stafford. But yeah, those years, man. They ran that district, and it was
they were
it was
tough.
great to
Yeah,
see. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, another
Uh,
kid too from College Park. You brought them up. I should mention Ethan Kersey. I saw him in the summer, just big. I think in the future, looking way ahead, he's a sophomore right now. Be a guy that's like a big power pitching guy that can just overwhelm a lineup as that development occurs and things like that. So he could be a guy potentially to watch in the district this year.
that's one. I'm glad you said that. That's something I missed. We did a rundown local for the Woodlands Online, and that's a
Mhm.
kid. I'm glad you said that. We kind of glossed over that one.
Yeah.
And they could be there in the end, but like I said, you go back and you look at the Woodlands, and you made. I'm glad you said that the 03, 04, 05 group when they had
Hmm.
Macias and Lehman and
Hmm.
Dotson and Amendola.
Yeah.
And then you kind of follow that up with Mickey Armstrong and that Drebeck and
Drebeck. Yeah.
Maxwell and Walker.
Hmm.
Those years before College Park opened, those teams were just
Yeah.
loaded. And I look at this team and exactly what you said. I look at this as depth, versatility.
Mm.
He's got guys. I spent about an hour with Coach Eastman the other day, and him and I were running through things, and he was saying, he's like, Jason, I could put 8 kids out there that are running like 4.6 40s.
Hmm. Yeah,
It-
right. No, it's there's like
it's
real
sick.
athleticism and physical traits and like the blend of pitchability on the mat. Like you mentioned Holyfield, one of the better breaking balls I think in Houston. Daigle has thrown a ton of innings for those guys in the past.
Yes.
Speckle's got the big velocity and the power stuff. But like there's you just go down the list of a bunch of guys that are going to pitch in college somewhere, and it's like hard to even get all those guys innings. It's just an
Yes.
embarrassment of riches with this group.
And it's one of those where as a coach, you're like, you love it, but then you're trying to juggle those pieces and you're trying to
Yeah.
keep the kids' mindset right and the culture in the dugout
Mm.
is difficult because we were running through. You said Holyfield. This is the only team in our district, and then probably within 15 6A as well. That's returning they're 1 and 2 starters.
Yeah, right.
Holyfield and Daigle, which you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go down the list. You said Schmeckel,
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Salas, a
Mm-hmm.
low 90s guy from the left
One of the
side.
best lefties in the state.
I
Yeah,
mean, he's
San
going to
Diego
San
State
Diego.
signing.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's a phenomenal kid.
He'd be an ace pretty much
Yeah.
99% other 6A program. Max McCrary, who I really like, two-way
Yes.
guy. He can pitch from the left side. He can swing the bat from the left side. He'd
Yes.
probably be an ace at most 6A programs as well.
And they're and those guys, except maybe Salas, McCrary see time in the field, Schmeckel see
Yeah.
time in the field, and like you said, a power arm out of Schmeckel. I mean, we keep him healthy. I was just I was talking with Coach Eastman. It's like, man, you got Holyfield, you got Daigle. They go 6 and 7 easy.
Mm-hmm.
They put the ball in play. They put it on the ground. They got a solid defense behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just watch what happens. And you bring him out of the bullpen, busting 93, 95 in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's over.
Yeah.
And it looks great on paper.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of what Pearland was able to do in the playoffs last
Yeah.
year when they, by design, Nico Partita kind of slowly built up as a pitcher. And then it's like, all right, we're going to unleash him in the playoffs when we need him. And then every
Yes.
time they got into a game three, it's like, all right, you're going to face Nico Partita in game three. And they
And that,
eliminated Cy-Fair, Memorial, all these teams going to the state title game. So this could kind of be how that sets up for these guys this year is that like, in the district play, they might not need a lot of those arms, but then you get into the playoffs. If you
yeah.
do get into a game three, well, we can roll out Salas, we can roll out Schmeckel, we can roll out McCrary, we can
Yeah.
roll out, all these guys that can throw out there. It's just such a big advantage.
And then you look at that lineup, it's right, left,
Yep.
right. I mean,
A
you
lot
can
of
attack
versatility.
hitters.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
and what Salas has, I mean, he's going to San Diego, and then McCrary heading off to U of H. You
Mm-hmm.
talk about all these guys, and it reminds me exactly what you said earlier. The 2000 when you had Dotson and Lehman
Yep.
and Macias, these guys all
Mm-hmm.
going to Rice and they're going to U of H. And you kind of go back to even
Shea
years.
Robin going to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that team was just, it was how those guys didn't win back to back to back to back titles. It from 02, 03,
Yeah.
04 just blows my mind away.
It's
And then,
tough. I mean, Tomball will run into that this year. Like,
yeah,
it's hard repeating that whole element of like, you've done it, finding that motivation to do it again with the target on your back and that same chemistry and all those sorts of things. It's really hard to repeat.
and well, the Woodlands went through that in the 06. You had that banner hanging out there, national champions 2006. You're basically putting a big old bullseye on your
Yep.
on your back to, come and get us. And everybody did. They ramped up to come play that team in 07. You know, shifting gears, you mentioned Tomball, and we're looking at that district 15 6A. And what Tomball has coming back. I've seen. I can't remember if it was you guys or another one of your competitors had put something out saying that they believe that they had the best 2027 or 2026 class in the state. And they're ranked number one. And again, I'm kind of going back to bias. I'll look at some of those lists between Vipe and PBR, and I'm sure you guys have one as well. And the Woodlands there's a couple of them, they're not even in the top 20. And I'm looking at this going, where's the love? And, do you see what I see? And I know you see what I see because we just
Like
ran
from
through it.
like a team rankings perspective.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
it just
to
blows
me,
my mind.
yeah. So we did a part of our preview coverage at Five Tools. We go through and we'll pick like state title contenders, which are basically teams that are kind of inside the top 10 that you like. And then we do a section that not enough love. And everybody was fighting over writing about the Woodlands because we see a lot of these guys in the summer. We cover them throughout the spring. And I'm looking at their roster. I'm like, this might be the most talented roster in the state. Like, even more so talented than Tomball. I think Dripping Springs is a phenomenal roster, but I'd put the Woodlands in terms of talent and depth and hitting and defense and pitching. I mean, to me, it's at the top of the list in the state. Like, it's as good or better than anyone. And Ron Eastman's been there forever. He's won a ton of games. He obviously knows what he's doing when it comes to that sort of thing. So, I agree. Like, if you're making a list of ranking the best teams in the state in 6A, like, you better not have many teams above the Woodlands if you've got any at all. Like, I understand putting Tomball there. They're
Yeah.
coming off the state championship, fully deserved to be number one until proven otherwise. But number two, I think I might have the Woodlands up there. I mean, it's just like I don't know how you look past the pitching they bring back, the experience they bring back, the depth, and then you look at just the dynamic elements of the lineup. It's really a perfect storm of roster to really go do a lot of damage in the playoffs and chase a state championship.
And then, you know, kind of running back and forth that comparison with Tomball, you look at one of the things that I find that it's a good situation to be in as a coach when you look at the catching position
Hmm.
at the Woodlands. You got Chase Bradley, who's returning. He was a sophomore, got most of the innings last season,
Hmm.
swings the bat well. Then you have Brady Perini behind him,
Hmm.
and those two duking it out. And you watch the problem he has with that. And you know, I was kind of joking with Ronnie the day. I said, "Hey, did you get a phone call from the Molinas?" I said, told him, I was like, you got these two kids that are duking it out that are really talented. You bring in him, and you know, I think that would have solved your problem on who you get
Yeah,
playing time to. That's a whole nother podcast we could talk about
right.
with him moving into Lake Travis, right?
Lake Travis, huh?
So, in speaking the catching position, kind of going back to Tomball being number one, they lost Aaron Beatty,
Hmm.
and kind of speaking of him, I've seen a lot, and maybe you know a little bit more on what he's seen at playing time. I've seen a lot of clips and videos coming out of the news stations and things out of Baton Rouge where
Hmm.
he's behind the dish in the scrimmages, and he's been tearing it up, lighting it up for LSU. And he was a big part of that run they had last year.
He was.
And he leaves, they bring back Reader, you know, that class that they have with the
Hmm.
26 group.
Hmm.
Um, you know, they're ranked number one and they got to prove it. You know, what do you see with this team doing again this year? Did you see them repeating? Do they have the firepower to do that?
Yeah, they've got, whenever you have Carson Reeder and CJ Sampson, it's just the way things set up in a district schedule and then a playoff schedule. I mean, I think those guys went a combined 27-1 last year, sub one ERA, barely walk anybody. They were basically a complete game every time they towed the rubber. So that's just such an advantage to have. And, in addition to their talent, what I think separates them is they just have such advanced feel for how to pitch, how to command the baseball, how to mix speeds, how to spin the baseball, how to turn a lineup over, the mental side of competing. To me, that's what really separates them. So as long as they've got those two guys, they're going to have the firepower. And then Harper Gates in that 2026 class as well. He started at third base for them last year. It was a lot of talk, fairly so, about Reeder and Sampson in that 2026 group. But I think Harper Gates is going to emerge as a guy that's mentioned with those guys as well. We have him ranked similarly. I think I've got him like 16th in the state. Sampson's in the top 10. Reeder's right outside the top 10. They're all kind of together there in the top 20. But Gates is a true A guy. He can run it into the low 90s on the mound. He can defend. He's probably going to play shortstop for those guys this year. He can really hit. I saw him at the area code select event down at Dakin Park. I got to get used to not calling it Minute
Oh,
Maid. Down at Dakin Park. That's going to take a
it's
long time to get used to calling it
well,
that.
it's funny because we just had about 3 years ago. They my air conditioning guy sold me on those units. I never heard of them,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, you got this is brand new. They do all these." And he's telling me all these things that they do, and so it was time to reinstall them. And then I'm telling people, "Hey, this is what I got." And then my neighbors are like, "Is that the company that they're renaming your air conditioning? Is that right?" So
I'd never heard of him until I saw the press release, and then I went down there. So that was took some time to get used to. But Harper Gates was really good there. But they've got the firepower. But man, if you look at who they lost from the lineup, you mentioned Aaron Beatty, who's gonna play at LSU. He's not gonna start, but he's gonna play, which is a feat for that team because that team is extremely good.
yeah.
Keegan Demmer, who was basically a backup catcher for those guys, goes to Sam Houston State. Braden Scherzer goes to Sam Houston State. Blaine Lucas was a really good left-handed hitting second baseman, goes to Louisiana. Coleman Ryan, one of my favorite defensive shortstops I've seen the last couple years. He ends up going to Texas Tech. Like you just go down the list. They lost so much veteran experience in that lineup. That's it's going to be your lot to replace. Catcher Hopkins will slide into that catcher position. Switch hitter with power, who's committed to A&M. Another one of those standout mega talents in that 2026 class. But they're going to have some questions to answer in the lineup. It's just when Aaron Beatty got going in the playoffs and they were rocking and rolling, like it
Yeah.
wasn't just pitching, like they were just pounding the ball all over the place. So I think they're going to take a step back offensively. But when you look at what they have on the mound, it's going to be really, really, really tough to knock those guys out of the playoffs as long as those two guys are healthy. And then you've got a Harper Gates lurking there as that number three, who's a potential difference maker on their mound as well.
And kind of going that he'll probably come in like we were talking with the Woodlands and these
Yeah,
other teams. What you were talking about with Partita, you bring those guys 1, 2, 3. If you play three
right.
games, or you win game one, you come into game two and you got a guy throwing 90, 92, 93
Hmm.
to close it out. And that's one of the things. Most of the coaches I've talked to over the years, the common theme, we talk about this the run through the playoffs. And the first person I heard from was Coach Eastman. I've been around him for almost 30 years now. And I heard this years ago from him was close a game. If you have the ability to close a game, you're going to go a long way.
Absolutely.
And and that's what he talks about those teams in 03, 04, 05, the 06 team. They could bring people in and just shut a game down, and
Hmm.
you lost all hope. And you see that, they have that this year. The Woodlands Tomball has that.
Hmm.
The offense might be lacking a little bit, but to speak volume, Aaron Beatty and I thought it was interesting. What's it? Catcher Hopkins, right?
Yeah.
He's coming. Yeah,
Perfect name for the
perfect name,
position.
right? You're
Hmm.
sliding right in.
Hmm.
Um, and he's going to the next level to be able to step in just to show what they had behind,
Yeah.
stacked in there, talented. And then what changes that district around the dynamic of adding Magnolia West
Yeah.
to that, and then Magnolia, and then you have Klein Collins in there. And I
Hmm.
want to dial in on Magnolia West. I had the opportunity to see them play Lake Creek last year in the regional finals
Hmm.
when they were repeat champions.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how difficult it was to do that. They finished fourth in their 5A district last year,
Right.
and then made that run that they were on to get back to state. And Coach Earls was the same thing. He's like, it was a grind, exactly what you had said, how difficult it was.
Hmm.
Everything they faced, they got everybody's best. They had the target on their back. And I think he was telling me they had played and it took a little bit longer to figure out if they were even going to get in, because it all
Hmm.
came down to tiebreakers and runs scored or runs allowed. And
If I
they got
remember
that
right, they had to
spot
win a Saturday game to
game.
get in,
Yeah.
if I remember right.
Yeah. It was a tie and they had to go because everything
Hmm.
was, yeah, you're absolutely right. And for them to make that run, and as I watched them play, one kid that he's back this year that really impressed me was the center fielder. Then they ran him out to the mound, and I was like, wow. And that's Cody Palacios.
Yes.
Man, that kid, and that's a grab for San Jack. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's a steal for them. I saw him come out. He's running balls down, gap to gap. He
Hmm.
could have played the outfield by himself.
Yeah.
The plays I saw him making in the gaps, running balls down, the instincts he has, picks the ball up off the bat, takes the angles. You see a ball hit into the alleys, and you're like, that's a double, and he's standing underneath of it.
Hmm.
And then they bring him out and they put him on the mound, and he's 89, 90, 91, 92 with life. And he's learning how to pitch.
Hmm.
And I was impressed with that kid.
Yeah, and he's been a big time performer for those guys since he was a sophomore. He kind of came to life as a sophomore in the playoffs and for that team, and was like one of their dudes. And then sure enough, in the playoffs this past year, like he had a bunch of big knocks, a bunch of big moments for those guys. But yeah, he's a true two-way guy, and for a long time he was kind of a position player first, and then people kept putting him on the mound. Like, man, he's really athletic. He's got some arm speed. He can run it up there pretty well, and he's going to be a big piece of the puzzle for those guys too. Another guy I really like, who's also a two-way guy, is Caldwell McFadden, who's heading to
Yeah.
Baylor. He
Taylor. Yep.
can really really hit, and I saw him over the course of his career against some top arms, and he's one of those guys where there's a really good pitcher on the mound, and you're like, all right. We'll see who the real hitters are, when you're facing this kind of guy, and he's one of those real hitters that can, the velocity, the stuff. And he'll run his fastball into the low 90s as well. And he's a gamer. Him and Palacios are both gamers. They're really experienced. really productive players. And they've always got a lot of talent at Magnolia West. But when you've got those two guys as seniors leading the way, that's going to be a tough. It's gonna be a tough group to compete against in the district play, just because of what they can run out there on the mound, and then what they're going to put in the middle of that lineup. Those two guys alone are going to help them win a lot of games.
Those, if I got those two games circled, I probably won't be able to be there because I'm watching. I'll be covering the Woodlands, but
Mhm.
when they play Tomball, I'm sure
Yeah.
the stands will be full, and there'll be a lot of guys sitting behind home plate holding radar guns. I think
Yep. Hmm.
watching those two teams compete, and then it was interesting as I looked at the schedule, our schedule early in the season. We have Magnolia West in the middle of in the heart of our district
Hmm.
on a off day. I think we're playing them right before spring break or right after spring break or Easter break maybe on a Thursday, and I'm looking forward to that just to
Yeah.
see what happens. Seeing the Woodlands compete with those kids, it'd be an interesting shootout to see as well on that end. Kind of shifting gears here in a couple weeks, you guys you're hosting the 5 tool event up in the Metroplex,
Uh-huh.
and I just wanted to get your take on that. The teams that are coming in, we're kind of we've been focused on the Texas kids, and I know you guys got teams coming from around the country coming in.
Yeah.
Are there a couple of guys that are going to be playing in that event that are, hey, if you're in the area, you might want to go see this kiddo?
Yeah, so 32 team event. And as best we can, we try to get a collection of like the highest end caliber of teams, and a lot of these teams you're probably familiar with, and your listeners are probably familiar with. Cy-Fair's coming up from Houston as well after their really successful season. Some of those DFW teams like Argyle, who has Grady Emerson, and they're a really loaded group. I mentioned Dripping Springs earlier. Cooper Rummel, who signed to Texas. Taylor Tracy, who signed to Tennessee. The list goes on and on with the caliber of talent that they have. Memorial from Houston, all their guys, Jackson Van Wee, who's heading to Houston, Cash Scarborough, who's heading to Oklahoma State, Matthew Manis, who's committed to Texas, Grant Sparandio, who's a major 2027 prospect, who's committed to Texas as well. You look at Lovejoy, who's probably the favorite in 5A to win the state championship with what they're going to run out there in the mound. But then some of those teams from out of state, Queen Creek in Arizona won the state championship there in their classification last year. They've got a kid named Tate Reynolds, who's he's a major quarterback prospect as well, but he's a really athletic, physical, dynamic talent. They got also another kid named Jet Berry, who's one of the better players in Arizona. His brother Jacob Berry was a first round pick out of LSU by the Miami Marlins recently, and Jet can really swing it from both sides of the plate. He's going to be one of the better hitters in the event. And then I'm really fired up about Faith Lufrin from Nevada. Probably the best team from that state. I know Bishop Gorman is really good as well. They've got a kid named Rookie Shepard in the 2026 class, and he's going to be in the mix to be a first round pick, I think. Really dynamic left-handed hitter. Can catch, can play shortstop, can play outfield. He's strong. I mean, he just looks the part of a pro prospect. When you size them up, it's like that's what they're supposed to look like, and then you watch them hit, and it shows there as well. So we're really, really excited about it. Ocean View is coming from California. Modern Day, who always has really good pitching, is coming from California as well. We got a couple of the best teams coming over from Hawaii. Fullerton Union, they're going to have a bunch of arms on the mound. They're coming from California as well. So it's going to be loaded. 32 teams. It's one of those deals like I wish I could be everywhere at once, but you can't. But fortunately, we'll have somebody videoing every single field and every single game and have a bunch of coverage from that as well. So it's going to be great, and I'm thrilled the Woodlands are back in it because it's fun to see the best against the best. Especially this time of the year, as those guys are getting prepped and ready for their district games and things like that. It's a perfect way to get a lot of guys out there and get a big test as you're heading into those games that really matter.
Are you guys? It was 5 tool. You were the first organization to do something along these lines in season. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we put this together. It was kind of the brainchild of two people. Drew Bishop, who used to work for us, is now the director of operations again at the University of Texas, and then Ryan Brewer, one of our longtime guys. It's been a just a baseball junkie and helping us with tournaments throughout the years. So yeah, it was kind of the brainchild. Like, hey, let's put something together and really just try to get as many awesome teams as we can in DFW. Because the thinking was for the pro scouts, there's always a big college tournament around this time of the year in the DFW. So it's like, hey, if we time this right, you guys can see some college teams. You guys can see some really high end high school players. The college coaches can hang out in DFW, just watch all of the really good high school players. So that was kind of the thought process behind it. We've had some really good players come through that. I mean, Cooper Pratt, who's in the Brewers organization right now, is like one of the top prospects in baseball. And from that group that came from Magnolia Heights, so they'll be back in it from Mississippi. So that was kind of the thought of it. And then there was, like everything in baseball, there was a little copycat element after that, which
Yeah.
is good. I mean, it's better for the kids, it's better for the college coaches, exposure and all that sort of thing. So I don't know if we were the first, but I know in the state we kind of sparked this type of event during tournament season to really put the best against the best, and having a great opportunity for college coaches and pro scouts to go see a bunch of players.
Yeah. And I've noticed, I was 04, 05, 06, 07 with the Heat, you
Hmm.
know, and no knock against them now, but it's just not what it was when I was there with Phil Cross and Sinisi and Ronnie Bay,
Hmm.
and I feel like that the select world has kind of taken a step back because you got so many teams now.
Hmm.
Like we took that '03 team over to Jupiter and won that. Jay Bruce and the Draybacks and Clemens'
Yep.
kids were on that team, and you watch how like it was perfect game. I think was the OG right in this world, and then you kind of see other organizations evolve, and what you guys have done, I feel, is you've gone outside the box and you've looked at different approaches to exposing the kids
Hmm.
and kind of tying the summer to the fall and into the regular season.
Yeah.
And I really like what you guys have done. And you mentioned the copycats. I've noticed that as well. There's a few others out there that are, I guess, would be, I'd say, competitors. And I
Hmm.
noticed one of them is doing exactly what you guys did last year um, in Texas. I don't know if they're in the Metroplex area or if they're doing it down here, but kind of the same thing, bringing teams in. Last question on your the tournament in DFW is Holiday was there last year, right? Is he coming back? Is his team
He's
coming back?
he's not. No, they were not in it last year, but they they played a bunch of games in DFW.
Okay, man.
So they kind of make it a point to swing through there, and I believe that they're doing that again. I believe on our we have a big Google sheet, staff Google sheet that kind of maps out, spring coverage and things like that. And I'm 99% sure Stillwater's on there again. So they didn't play in that event specifically, but they come through DFW and play a few games around that time of the year.
Yeah. So just real quick, we're transition into some Texas kids that you think will be some
Mhm.
day one guys in the draft, and we're kind of on Holiday. Do you see him? Do you think he's the guy this year?
I think he's probably going to be a first round pick. I don't know, like number one overall. To me, I think that is still very much up in the air. I think there's probably a pretty long list of guys that could potentially claim that. I don't think there's like a very clear cut like this is the guy
Yeah.
type of deal. Well, maybe Jason LaBall yet. I mean, he hit three homers the opening weekend at 8 a.m. So
That's sick.
whenever you got a 6'5" left-handed hitting outfielder who moves like he does and has the power he does and the track record, pretty good bet that he might end up being the guy. But I think he's going to be a first-round pick. I don't know if it's going to be where Jackson went, but man, he's got a lot of bat speed. And he's got a lot of power, and he's obviously got the bloodline. So he's
Yeah.
certainly going to be in the mix for sure.
Yeah, you watch some of those one-off videos that pop up on your logarithm, right? Of
Yeah, yeah,
it was him and his brother and his dad, and I can't
yeah.
remember the guy's name. He kind of travels around, and what's his ex King of JUCO guy?
Oh, King of JUCO. Yeah,
They were
yeah.
hitting balls off a tee for EV, and it's you just watch him, and he's next to his brother, who's already an MLB player, and
Hmm.
he looks the part.
Yeah.
And that's one of the
Yeah. He's
things
already
that,
bigger than his brother is. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the things they taught us in scouting school. I think you went through some of that as well. Is
Yep.
you show up at the ballpark, if the guy looks the part, that's probably the guy you're there to watch.
Yeah.
And some, a lot of times it doesn't pan out. You see a guy that's 6'3" and 220 and chiseled, and he trips on his own feet. And you're like, oh, that's not the
Hmm.
guy. Um, but you just look at Holiday and his movements and his actions and the way he swings the bat, and you you see Jackson
Yeah. Yeah.
and the caliber of player that he is. Yeah, I'd love to get up there to get a chance to watch him play in high school. Kind of close things out because I know you got to get out and go. Wrap things up. The last thing I want to talk about is these high school players. We have the rule changes coming at the NCAA level with the rosters being cut down to 32. That's correct, right? 32 or 34.
34. Hmm.
And now you're starting to see a lot of the kids I've talked to that I hit with in the cages that are playing summer ball, seeing these coaches out on the road, watching them is thinning down. Versus from back in the day when I was coaching, we would have a showcase, a Houston Heat showcase at Rice and U of H, and there'd be 25 scouts, college
Hmm.
coaches just hanging around watching our kids play. And I mentioned that to these guys, and they're like, man, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
How is that affecting, if you're a high school kid, you're a 2026 grad,
Hmm.
how is this stuff, trickling down and affecting them? And what kind of advice would you recommend to them going through this recruiting process? Like where should they zero in on? What are some things that they should be doing to get exposed?
Yeah, well, I think first off, they're doing themselves a disservice if they're not simply following what's happening in the game. A lot of those things that you mentioned, like familiarize yourself with what the roster limits are going to look like when they're going to go into place. Familiarize yourself with what's happening with the transfer portal. Look at the programs that are really recruiting a lot of guys out of the transfer portal. Look at the programs that are losing a lot of guys for whatever reason to the transfer portal. Look at the programs who are heavily recruiting JUCO guys. Look at the ones that aren't. To me, the thing that drives me nuts the most about the high school player is some of them just go through and it's like D1 or bust. And some
Mm-hmm.
of them do get that D1 opportunity and they're committing to places. And I'm looking at some of these commitment lists and there's 22, 24. You throw in the JUCO guys, 26 names on a commitment list. And let's do the math here. You're going to have
Yep.
to cut these rosters of 34 players next year. So where are all these guys going? And I just feel so often I see these kids making decisions and then they get to July and sometimes even August and the rug's pulled out from under them.
Yep.
And it's like it just keeps happening. And it's like at some point the high school kids got to take ownership of like paying attention to what's going on here. And my best advice to them would be it doesn't matter where you start. You can start at a D2, you can start at a JUCO, you can start at a mid-major D1, you can start at a high major D1. Wherever you start is not necessarily where you're going to end up or where you have to end up. Yeah, it'd be great if you went to Oklahoma State or LSU from the jump and you got an opportunity. But the reality is, like, these coaches are telling you, if you listen to them and you follow their actions, that these rosters now are 1 year rosters. They're building a roster for that season. And
Yep.
then when that season ends, they're thinking about how to build a roster for the individual next season. I mean, Jay Johnson gave an interview in the summer. He was just honest about it. Like, look, this is what the game is now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't build a program anymore. I can't bring in a freshman and hope to develop him for 2 years. And then when he's late in a sophomore year or when he's a junior, it's like I can unleash him. And here he is. He's an awesome player. That's not how it works anymore. So, for the high school player, to me, my best advice would be to pay attention to what's happening in the game. Understand that with these roster limits in the transfer portal, the game is continuing to get older in college baseball. It's getting stronger. It's
Yep.
getting more physical. The average age of player on the roster is getting older because these coaches have to win games to keep their job.
Exactly.
And when they're picking between an 18-year-old coming out of high school who they think is really good or a 22-year-old who they've got synergy video on,
Mm-hmm.
TrackMan data on, statistics on. They can see what he looked like against certain pitching. They know what the 22-year-old's probably going to provide them. They're not sure what that 18-year-old is going to provide them. And chances are they're going to lean to the older guys. So understand that and really just go where you can play. JUCO baseball in the state of Texas is awesome.
Opposed.
It's really talented. They're big, they're strong, they're fast, they throw really hard. They all get scouted by the D1s. They
Mm-hmm.
all get scouted by the pro scouts. So go somewhere where you can play. And then in the summer, be cognizant of which events are going to provide you the best exposure opportunity. And now, we hear from college coaches all the time. They've got to be a little bit more efficient and strategic about where they're going because they got to
Mm-hmm.
try to maximize their opportunities to go see a lot of players. So, I mean, even some of our biggest events still in DFW, we were fortunate to still have a ton of college coaches. I believe at our event for the Rising 2026 prospects, I think we had over 100 college coaches and pro scouts there. I mean, the same deal for our event for those rising seniors. So be strategic about where the college coaches are going to give yourself an opportunity to be seen. And also, too, like when the fall comes around and heading into the winter, go to college camps.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best bang for the buck. I think you can pay $150. You show up, you're going to get scouted by that program that day. And if you go to a Texas State camp and you're not a Texas State caliber player, but you stand out. Those guys all have friends in the industry. They're going to call their
Yep.
buddy to JUCO. They're going to call their friend to the D2. They're going to call somebody else and say, "Hey, man, I can't take this kid. He's really good, though. I think you should take a look at him because they know if that kid goes there and he performs and he's great, maybe he comes back to Texas State." So, a long story short, just if you're a kid, pay attention to what's happening and understand that the caliber of freshman player that's able to crack a D1 lineup right now, the bar is so extremely high. So you've got to be aware of, okay, where can I go and develop and potentially open the doors down the road to go to those places I want to go to. To me, that's the most important thing. I think we're through the era to where guys can go sit on the bench and develop at places. I think that's over now. I think
Yep.
you've got to go play, you've got to get reps, and you got to go see what happens.
I mean, amen, brother. Because I work with kids in the cage quite a bit. And one of the first things we start talking about school, exactly what you said. And I'm trying to break that mindset. It's, oh, I'm going to Texas. I'm going to go to A&M. I'm going to go, and they're naming their
Yeah.
top 3 schools. And it's, I was an educator and a high school coach, and I was always, the Ted Lasso thing, right? Believe you can do it. And you put the work in, that things will fall in place.
Mhm.
But now, I'm telling these kids, if you're not a top 100 guy in the country, going to a school like LSU, take a different route.
Yeah.
And not to say that you can't get there. If that's your dream and that's where you want to be and you think you can play there, then right now, I'm evaluating your tools. You're not, you could probably get there, but you're going to get cut in the fall and they're going to send you to Meridian, junior college. It's like, why not go there in the first place?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what my sell has been on these kiddos is, Galveston, Alvin, San Jack, I mean, Blinn, McLennan, you got some of the top 5 JUCOs in the country are right here.
Yeah.
An hour around the Houston corridor that you can get into. And then you go down, you got schools like Wharton, you've got Coastal Bend, that guy, he's down there trying to build a program. And then you got Navarro, we just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said, I mean, what you said is just, it's spot on, right? I tell them, look at where the kids that are sophomores, where are they committed?
Yeah.
And that will tell you who the head coach has ties to. If you start to see 4 or 5 kids on that roster going to Baylor, or 4 or 5 kids going to Oklahoma State, 2 or 3 kids, that's telling you that coach is networked with those D1 schools, and he's going to promote you, and he's going to help you move on to the next level, because it's success for him too.
Yeah.
Right. His track record is, if I'm sending a bunch of kids, no offense to Stephen F. Austin, but if I'm running a JUCO problem, that's where all my kids are going, and I want to go to LSU, I'm not going to come to your school. I'm going to look at other JUCOs. And that's kind of how I have guided these kiddos. And I think exactly what you said. You're going to see. To me, it's turning into what happened in MLB. When they started really going after the college guys and using the analytics, we need older
Yeah.
guys. We need guys that are 21, 22
Yeah.
that we can put in high A ball that have ridden on buses and been in tough places and they've been on the
Mhm.
road and they know how to use their per diem and they know how life is.
Yeah.
And the transition is they're just going to play baseball because all the life transitions they've already been through.
Hmm.
And it just makes that road to the MLB for those guys a little bit easier versus an 18-year-old kid that's away from home and he's battling all these things. And I would sit, you probably had these conversations with them. You go in and you do the interviews. You're doing your homework, and I'm telling these players and their parents all the trials and tribulations of being in the minors, and they're like, "You're acting like you don't want us to go play baseball. I just want you to know how tough it is.
Yeah.
I want you to know what the challenges are, and are you up to it? If not, then I don't want to waste my time on the phone with your agent or you trying to draft you." And that's kind of the mentality I've had with these high school kids is like, look, not to say you can't get there, you're going to have to take a different path.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, your X feed's probably like mine. Man, every morning in the summer, I've opened up my commitment.
Mm. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I've opened
Yeah.
up my
Yeah.
commitment. I've
Yeah.
opened up my recruiting. And you
Hmm.
see all these coming through, and
Hmm.
it's not just like a one off. I mean, I'll open up X and there'll be like 8 or 9,
Yeah.
and it's just like, dang, you see what's happening. It's like, okay, you got to change with the times. And what you're saying, what you said is great advice.
Yeah.
I echo
Thank you.
that, and it's
And
a
kids too, like look at the game at the highest level, and then look at where those guys came from.
yeah.
There's so many different paths.
Yep. I mean, you
There's
see a
so many colleges where these kids were drafted from, or
slippery
oh,
rock.
this, yeah,
you know?
like Seaver King was a D2 guy and then transferred to Wake Forest and became a first round pick. Like,
Yep.
there's so many different paths, and guess what? If you're really, really good, there are no secrets anymore.
Yes.
They're not any secrets anymore. They will find you if you're really, really good. I guarantee you, they will find you. There are no secrets anymore.
Yeah. Those days are gone.
Yeah, long
That I
gone.
gotta, you see all the scouts together, and the days of you got the guy in your back pocket playing somewhere in St. Augustine. That's the 6'3" country boy that nobody knows
Yeah,
about. They all
yeah.
know about him
They
now.
all know now. They all know.
Everybody knows. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's the whole scouting world's even changed. That's a whole other podcast as well.
Yeah, it is.
But kind of wrap things up. I know you got to get going. Again, Dustin, could you tell everybody how to find you, where you are, social
Yeah.
media?
Yeah, follow me on X, Dustin L. McComas, and our Five Tool accounts. Our main one is Five Tool, and then we have a bunch of regional accounts. Five Tool Texas, Five Tool STX is South Texas, and then for our other states as well. And then we're also on Instagram. But really, the fivetool.org website, it's a great resource for college coaches, for players, also for fans. If you're a fan of the Woodlands, you can get a little fan account and you go on there and you click follow for the Woodlands. And in your feed, it comes every single piece of coverage we do about anybody who goes to the Woodlands, whether they're freshmen, whether they're seniors, whether they're on varsity, JV, whatever we've ever covered about those guys will come up to your feed. So it's a good way to kind of follow through there, all your favorite players from your high school. But yeah, too. I know you mentioned I didn't mention a couple of guys, but in the Houston area draft wise, Omar Cerner, Lutheran South Academy, big time catcher, signed to LSU. Jack McKernan from Rich Point, left-handed pitcher. We mentioned Partita, Lucas Franco at Cinco Ranch, David Ramirez at Clear Falls. I mentioned Cooper Rumler. I'm a big Blaine Bullard guy at Klein Kane. I think he's a phenomenal player. And obviously the headliner is Casey Cunningham at San Antonio Johnson. So those are a few guys draft wise to kind of keep an eye on and follow throughout the year. But yeah, follow me on social media, and follow, more importantly, follow our Five Tool coverage both on the website, social media, as well. And this is my favorite time of the year. I know what we do at Five Tool is geared for the summer, and that's what writes the checks, and it helps keep a roof over my head. But I really think you learn so much about a player in the spring. When you show up to a Woodlands Grand Oak games and the stands have got some people in there, and some students are kind of chirping, and like there's some it matters what happens in that game. I think you find out so much about a player in those environments. So I can't wait to get out there to the spring. Although I really hope that the temperature warms up here soon because that's
It's
nothing
20,
worse than trying to video when it's about 20 degrees outside. It
2022
just doesn't work.
on
Oh, it doesn't work.
22 on Thursday and Friday. I just
Oh,
got back from skiing. I was one of those, if you saw the news, that got stuck up on the Eisenhower Tunnel on I-70. It took me 6 hours to go 90 miles.
oh my gosh.
So I brought all that. It's following me back here.
Oh
Yeah,
well,
sorry
well,
about that, ladies and gentlemen. But
yeah.
yeah,
Not thrilled about that.
yeah, 22 on Thursday, and I think like 28 on Friday.
Ugh, no, no, thank you.
And everything's kicking off this weekend. Tournaments are
Yeah, yeah. It's
going.
supposed to be a big celebration, not supposed to be a big ice storm.
Yeah, and then we kick off district against Grand Oaks
Hmm.
a week from today. It's our first district game. It's kind of weird this year in our district because they stacked one game early, and then we don't play Grand Oaks again until we get back from you guys'
Hmm.
tournament up in Dallas.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, but hey, I know you got to run, and I appreciate you coming on. The insight, I love it. If you haven't followed Dustin on X, jump over 5 Tool. Great info, great profiles. The exposure for the kids. It's great. I love what you guys do and what 5 Tool is doing. And you guys keep up the great work. And it was a pleasure to speak with you today, Dustin.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks for inviting me on. Had a good time and looking forward to seeing the Woodlands up there in the festival this year.
All right, brother. Take care, and I'll catch up with you later.
Thank you.